Hi, Micheline.
Hi, Claire, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Are you well?
Yes, very well. Recovering, relaxing, and getting into a routine after the huge upheaval,
Yes, exactly.
which
And
was several weeks.
and that's exactly what I want to talk to you about, because you've just made this monumental move to Zimbabwe, and I've discovered something new. I thought you were Brit, but you're not, are you? I've been deceived in the years that I know you.
So, yeah. I mean, I had to learn to speak English differently, went to the UK, um, because I realized nobody could understand the colloquialisms that wait in the language spoken here. And of course, then you go to India, English is spoken differently again. In America, it's different. Canada, it's different. So yeah, I had to learn to speak English to be understood.
Well, you did such a good job. You totally convinced me. And all this time I thought you're British. So, but you are actually Zimbabwean, born and bred,
Yes,
raised,
yes,
and you're effectively returning home. You're now you're talking from
absolutely.
Zimbabwe.
Yeah, not something that I ever imagined was possible in my lifetime. I never ever wanted to leave my home, but politics came and it was the only path I could at the time. So I made the move and I opened my mind to many different things, cultures, different ways of thinking. And so I'm not unhappy of having had those experiences. But I never thought I'd get home in time. And so that is a treasure, a real treasure, because my whole dream to build a home, live here indefinitely, and visit London once for 2 weeks, adventurous. And I lived most of my life in London.
So in effect, you are an honorary Brit because you have lived in England a lot.
Yeah, I suppose so. And of course, I lived in France and Portugal for a year and Luxembourg for a year, and I traveled a bit on this. So that was lovely to lot of traveling, but I was able to go to North Africa, Morocco, Algeria. So that was very into work there as well. Djibouti as well.
So you're quite widely travelled, especially across Europe and North Africa then.
Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate because with North Africa, I hadn't appreciated how very different it is from sub-Saharan Africa, which was my whole knowledge as a child growing up. I also didn't realize how many French colonies are in Africa because I grew up in an Anglophile system and just around me was Anglophile. And it was a Senegalese of mine said that 35 out of the 53 countries are Francophone, which for me was quite amazing to realize because I just thought it was all British.
Mm, mm.
So yeah, so very fortunate. I love traveling, so I've been to Canada, been to China, Australia. Um, a few most of my travel I get in around Europe, and then as a child we went to Mozambique, South Africa. I was at university in South Africa, so yeah, that not more than many, but not as much as some of my friends.
Yeah, but you've had the kind of opportunity to live in different places. I mean, many
Yeah.
people travel widely, but we don't all take up the occasion or opportunity to live in a place. So, when you look back at your life of the different countries you've traveled, how has any of that helped you in this big move that you've made now?
Um, one of the things for me was language. Different languages, but I thought, if you're going to buy a house and do all of this, it must be in a language that I can, which for me is limited to French and English. Okay, and also I have over the years, and you know, because I'm Zimbabwean, a lot of my friends are from Africa one way or another. And I spent time in France where I'm francophones, from, African countries there, Benin, Senegal, Ivory Coast come to mind. Okay. And over the last years, I've been thinking, because I think Africa's, not be as troubled as the West, and so it could be interesting. But other friends have come and they're making very, very incredible lives for themselves. One of my friends said, Africa's definitely another look. And the more I started looking and opening my mind to possible, I realized that I could achieve here the language, the fact that I was my home, and the opportunities that are here in a country that now, when I left 40 years ago, there's a lot of poverty, a lot of friction, trouble. And now what I've come to see is a country that had time to grow, to evolve. Now you've got huge entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, streets are filled with what I call pop-up shops, but they never shut them down at night, not stolen, but they'll have artwork, which could be furniture, it could be ironwork, it could be fencing, it could be tomatoes, anything, garden centre. They're all there on the sides of the road, and it's very safe here, compared to the trouble I remember. Now, that doesn't mean to say that the country doesn't have its issues, but we went out on Saturday and started noticing farms are starting to build up again. But I remember driving through Zimbabwe in about 1987, and there were farms, everything was decimated. So what you're getting is a very vibrant, highly educated population which has ambition and a sense that their time has come. And it's beautiful to see and to be a part of. So yeah, a very big surprise for me, but I'm very happy with the energies that I'm feeling here and abilities. Just I don't know, little things like over the years, I discovered I had problems with the food, the shops, and my mind started turning towards, well, wouldn't it be a sign of freedom, if you like, to grow my food instead of being in a job? What do I do in a job all day except get money to pay other people? So my thoughts are going towards my own, taking more responsibility for my own life, I suppose, working with nature more. So hence the permaculture, off-grid lifestyle, dream life, which I know lots of people have done, but sense that you create it, you're responsible for it, I don't know, it kind of grabs me at the moment. So yeah.
So do you have every intention of creating an off-grid permaculture life and home in Zimbabwe for yourself?
Oh yes, very much so. Everything grows here. One of the myths that you don't see on Western, but everything grows here. Okay, there is no reason. I mean, avocados there, pawpaws there, bananas there, spring onions, rape, pineapples. I mean, you imagine it, and half the supermarkets in Britain are full of food that comes from this part. Beans, peas. It's their fruits all the time. So that for me, my interest, because I became very ill on processed foods, I did venture into it product and realized that I started healing by taking it out. And I realized that much as it was lovely to live on pills and that couldn't make me better compared to those in the shops, that still for me was enough, because you don't know who can put what in there. So here, because everything grows, there's been the Eastern Highlands, cotton, it's here. So I want to take advantage of working harmoniously with Earth, because obviously I think we've become connected in the West. Connected to computer, but you're not connected to what I call really, which is which is the earth. It's your neighbors, people, around you, the community helping each other out. And that's one of the things you hear, how friendly people are, how easy it is to make friends. And they'll all give you advice, go to that one for that, go to that one for that. So yes, permaculture is absolutely on the agenda. And when you look at the ethos of people who work with permaculture, it is very much an expansive thought, if you like, because you're working with, and there's talk now that perhaps herself is a being of intelligence anyway, but you're working with another being to create something that is very, what I think, now they get tomatoes that taste lovely. I mean, tomatoes with a flavor. Cucumber has a flavor. I mean, that's exciting compared to where I've been, And then there's the off-grid lifestyle. And one of the things I'm looking very much at is African architecture, which has kind of been rubbished into the side. But actually, if you look at how it's designed to keep buildings cool, for air to circulate within it, which can't really be done with the modern building techniques, So, and I love houses, and so the idea of, and I can always remember, all the windows must be open so that there's air passing through. I mean, that's just not something you can see in Europe, So, and for me, it's the ingenuousness of it all, the intelligence behind it, the method behind it, and the beauty that can be created from earth. For me, that's so exciting.
Absolutely.
And, I look at that compared to life that I had in the banks, which to an extent, whilst highly paid, is not really constructed to build a society of peace and love. I worked, but was I connected to the people? Was I connected to the earth? Was I disconnected? And I think I was very distant, So, yeah.
So it's interesting because you left Zimbabwe pretty much in a state of heartbreak from what you've said to me in the past. And then you're returning, and it's a very healing journey. You're talking about the vegetables and things like that, but you're also talking about the connection with people and the connection to a community and the connection to earth. So all of it, all of your vision, all of your goals are part of quite a major healing journey, not just moving off the pills.
Yeah, exactly. The pills and the potion. Yeah, absolutely. And for me, I'm very grateful for it. So far, I haven't broken down in tears. I don't know if there'll be a day where I go somewhere and I'll be in floods of tears. I don't know. But so far, it's very, very healing. I I got here just under a month ago, and my body is already reacting in a very positive way to the food, which here we don't have chemtrails. I mean, that's quite an amazing thing. We don't have chemtrails. And if you talk about what about the chemtrails? What? I mean, it's just not a thing, So yeah, it is. I'm very grateful that it's such a, I was very nervous. I came out in April to just have my siblings suggested that perhaps it's a good idea to go and just make sure that I know what I'm doing. Well, I haven't been here since '87, so perhaps I'd better do something like that. And so I came here and I realized towards the end of my trip, I was terrified because I didn't know what I was going to have to, and actually what I encountered was a very peaceful country moving up, that's stepping into its own power. Whatever you see on the news is not the truth. I mean, there is so much money here. If you look at the cars, when my mother was here 28 years ago, cars, you couldn't buy cars. Secondhand cars were an appreciating asset. In the West, they're all depreciating. Here, they were appreciating assets. Now, Calculators are everywhere. And they're big SUVs. It does, sure, you've got the odd jalopy going around, but on the whole, people are driving smart cars, and then look, that mortgages aren't really a thing. You can get them, but most house purchases are done in cash. And you think about that, yeah, it's very different from the place I left coming up for 40 years ago, and very different. I left a very troubled country. My mother left a desperate country because business had collapsed, and the change and the growth is beautiful. It's just a relief, and it's lovely to feel relaxed, the environment. And I suppose I was expecting perhaps to feel a bit more emotional about coming back. And I don't know if it's just because I'm slotting in and it's where I feel is right. But, people are incredibly patient. Here's the nature of the people. They don't to get that aggressive. So perhaps it's them that I'm just aligning with, feeling at home. That I don't know if it makes
sense. That's wonderful, because it is a huge, moving countries is an undertaking, even if you're going for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, but to return home, there's a sense of you knowing it, but there will also be a sense of you finding out about it. Have you been visiting during the 40 years you've been away?
No, the last time I was here was 87, and I stayed away because my heart had been broken. I saw it in so many pieces that long time to put the pieces back together again, as I said. But now, when I came back in April, I wanted to drive a car. I drive cars all over the world, but I didn't want to drive a car. The roads were chaotic. Towards the end, I was just terrified because I had to expect,
Yeah.
And fortuitously, I was a very nice friend who was able to ease me in gently, I'm driving the cars quite happily here. I'm not going into anything. The roads look chaotic, but people are very polite because the street lamps the robust traffic lights don't often work. People get along just fine, so yeah, I suppose and then you look back, because I've moved countries several times. To the UK, from the UK to go from Portugal back to the UK, then to France. I was in France for a number of years since 2008, and I left at the beginning of last year. But this is the first time I've moved with all my possessions. Before, it was just a suitcase. And now it's with the possessions, and that's a whole level of stress. The car is in the container. Everything was packed into the container on the high seas. And getting ready for that's what I found very, very exhausting, was packing everything up. So that when the removals meant they took less than 3 hours to get everything into the container, and then the container went. But yeah, that's the first time I've moved household. So yeah.
Yeah, I totally relate to that. When we moved over to Massachusetts, we shipped, and it's quite challenging, because you're still living with what you're living with, but you have to pack up. And
Yes.
I've learned a lot of lessons from that experience, because there were things we should have shipped that we didn't ship, so ultimately we had to give them away. And there was, there were things we could have juggled the last few weeks without, that would have been useful to be in a shipping container.
Yes.
And obviously the
Yes.
wonderful thing about a shipping is you're paying for volume, you're not paying for weight. So if it fits
Yeah.
into the allocated volume
It
you've
goes in.
selected to pay, it goes in. So, there are many things I could have brought over that I didn't. And like
Yes.
you, I moved with all my possessions. So it is a big undertaking, just
Yeah.
the shipment. And
Yes.
yeah, it's completely
Yeah.
exhausting.
Yeah.
And
It is.
yeah,
It is. Yeah. And I think that was the day after we arrived here, it was like, oh, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to get up and do anything. So for one day, I just did nothing, and then
absolutely.
the next day we had to go get food.
Yeah. Yeah, one has to eat, and at least you discovered all these beautiful foods that taste so fresh and delicious. And
Beautiful. Yeah, yeah. We're drinking baobab juice, okay? And baobab is a superfood, okay? And it's a local tree here that I want to incorporate into my off-grid lifestyle, because apparently it's really good at fixing nitrogen into the soil.
oh,
But so people put it in smoothier, you can, they have butter and whatnot. So that is something that's certainly having a healing effect on us as well, which is wonderful. Yeah, okay, I'm looking for, because the baobab trees, they just hold huge amounts of here. They're not very pretty trees. In Madagascar, they're far more, I don't know, because they're tall, and then the leaves look like it's the roots. It's kind of very neat and tidy. Here, the buds are not neat and tidy, but they're huge, absolutely huge. And that leaves 2 weeks in the year, because they're conserving all that's it for leaves. So
wow.
really interesting.
And so are you discovering, you described the country as beautiful in terms of the people and the nature of the people and what you're discovering in that sense. Is it beautiful
Yeah.
to look at? Even though that particular tree is not attractive, I get the impression there's so much nature. It's beautiful. Is that the case of where you're living, or where you're planning to live when you're off grid?
Yes, in my opinion. Yeah. In my opinion, it is a very beautiful country, and I think that's one of the things Westerners don't tend to understand, is just how beautiful Africa is. Okay, and the Zimbabwe's Harare is quite high. It's about 90 meters above sea level. So the temperatures here tend not to vary too much, sort of from 10 to maybe 30 degrees, in above 30 degrees 1 or 2 days here and there. But the temperatures are pretty steady. In the dry season goes down to 10, and the wet season, the build up season, maybe 30, 35 for a couple of days. Okay. Rain is plentiful. Okay, I was shocked, I think, as a child, to learn that Zimbabwe has as much rain as Britain, and
It
yet
has
it's
as
got a
much rain.
completely countryside. I believe so. Yeah, and certainly if on the eastern border you've got 3 ranges. Okay, and there it rains all year, and it's much cooler. Okay, that's the border with Mozambique. So that's ultimately where I want to sort of set up my home, is in the Eastern Highlands, acre cooler than Harare, but Harare is not that. The heat is different. It's a dry heat, whereas I find in Europe it's a very humid, and cities, and I don't like that kind of heat. But here it's dry, so clothes dry very quickly, and space. Everybody has space. There's space. So I can't remember what your question was, but I think the landscape, the mountain ranges. If you go down to Mozambique, I can remember a child. We went to a place called Tofo Beach, Tofo, and we used to run on the beach in the morning. The sand used to squeak under our feet, and there was one beach where it was in shells, just beautiful shells, And of course, you've got the coconuts there, and the coconuts all grow there. And here you've got down in the low veld, what they call the sort of part of Zimbabwe, you'll have more farming, and you've got huge ranches because it's much drier there. Here you've got orange groves up in Harare, the orange groves up, it's called Mazoe. But as I say, everything grows. You know, okra, you think of watermelons, pawpaws. The list just goes on. I mean, what doesn't? Yeah, and then the flowers, the strelitzias. Okay, they're a dime a dozen. The flame lilies is the national flower of Zimbabwe. Okay. I can remember the garden back home. I'm here. I haven't seen the house that I grew up in because it's down a driveway I can't see. But my mother had a whole bed of, she loved her petunias and foxgloves. And you have here, what do they have? You have them in Asia as well. They're beautiful frangipani trees, okay, with the most incredible scents. Gladi, you know, incredible scents. So jasmine, honeysuckle, you can go on and on and on, you know. And then the local trees, the fruit here that's not really known in the West. You can grow rice here, I've discovered. It's a local grain of rice, you know. Soya grows incredibly well here, chickpeas, you know. You go to there's a what you call a precinct, and in one of the suburbs, I'm in the northern suburbs of Harare, and what's beautiful now, which I was told was going extinct, are cycads, which is an ancient type of fern. Okay, and when I was told they were becoming extinct, now they're everywhere. Everybody made a determination to grow them. Now a dime a dozen. Cycads are everywhere. And just incredible beauty if you want to be a god, you know. You know, so yeah. I mean, the mountains, the rivers, the waterfalls, because of course Victoria Falls here, which is on the border with Zambia. And of course, you've got the lake, the Malik, that was made in the early 60s, which hydroelectric power to Zambia and Zimbabwe. It's kind of a holiday resort for folks, Kariba, the islands that people can go to. And then, of course, you've got parks near Victoria Falls and down sort of the very driest part, Gonareju, where you see all sorts of wildlife, just free, you know. So yeah, there's plenty to see and do. And of course, ruins, which people have kind of missed from the West, but Zimbabwe has been hypothesized as being the homestead of one of the gods in Ki. So that's very interesting because you've got really ancient history. People have sort of, remember, people said, oh, nobody knew who the civilization they disappeared. And now people are saying, well, actually, if you look at the tablets, that looks like it could be in homestead, Great Zimbabwe, that nobody's been able to say what, you know. So I think that's coming more and more to be important, is to understand precisely the extent of the history in Africa that has kind of been pushed aside. So there's lots to see and do, so much. The markets I'm going to, the artisans, they're making their own soaps, their own spoons, their own fudge, their own shoes, their own creams, their ornaments, their own household, okay, furniture. And these are just iron shops, markets, you know. You could spend a fortune, a small fortune.
And I'm sure you will when you've designed your African architecture
I
home,
shall.
and then you need to put these things inside.
It has to blend in, doesn't it?
Yes, exactly. And then if Zimbabwe has lots of rain, does it equally have lots of sun? Because you use solar energy, don't you? And you can use solar energy when you're off grid.
Absolutely. The Eastern Highlands more rain, and it's cooler because it's higher, which appeals to me no end, okay, because I prefer to hot, okay. But if it rains, on the whole, my experience has been for maybe an hour, maybe two, that, okay. That rains last week that lasted all night is unusual in my experience, okay. Yeah, if it rains, I can remember when I got to England, my mother said, do you want to go to the shops? And I thought, well, it's raining. No, I don't want to go to the shops. And then what I realized was that if I did go to the shops then, it would never stop raining. I'd never get out of the house. Whereas here, you don't do anything. You wait for it to stop in an hour and then you keep going.
Absolutely.
Yes, sunshine, I mean, is plentiful. Absolutely plentiful.
Amazing. And then you can afford to buy all the beautiful things for your house because the sun and the solar energy will be on tap in your off-grid.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And from all the research I've done, absolutely no reason to imagine a different existence, okay, just because you're on solar. Far from it. You should be able to do everything, do the calculations to say, this is what I want, ergo, I need a solar providers. They've even got Starlink providers now, right? So you can have internet. It's really reliable and fast, so that may be a consideration for the future for the internet if we're going off grid, because they're farmers, they're definitely off grid. So yeah, there's no reason to imagine a deprived existence at all, you know. Just a different being. So for instance, one thing, it's perhaps a bit base, but I can remember a Canadian lady saying, can you imagine chop down trees to wipe our backsides when we go to the loo, okay? And there's bush that grows here in Africa, and if you have this bush, the leaves are the perfect size and everything to go to the loo. So it's just all those kinds of things, changing habits. You know? It's kind of funny, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, when people put those statements, we chop trees to wipe our backsides, and I thought, that's a very point.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of trees for toilet paper.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so if you're going to do this vast undertaking of creating an off-grid home and everything, this is a permanent move. You feel quite settled in this being a permanent move.
Very much so. Yeah, absolutely. You know, these are kind of big projects. I can see, I study podcasts of people who are doing precisely this, you know, and you can see they start off with a plan and then they go, we hadn't thought about this, so we better do this first. It's just a never-ending list of jobs. But what it shows is how capable people become and how they solve the problems, and how for them a good time is to be with other such living off grid, helping each other build their farms or their steads, and you know, that kind of, I've got plenty of fruit on my tree here, go and make some pies. You know, I've got, and this whole circle of sharing, you know, I think is really living, you know, as a lifestyle. Just peaceful people. And I went to Portugal one time, took 2 weeks out of my banking and went there. And what we realized is that people who do that kind of living have time to nice, you know, whereas if you're in the city and these high-powered jobs, and people are nice in the cities. And so I thought, well, maybe that's what I need to think about is, you know, do I want to be a nice person?
Well, I think we've both lived the high city, stressful lifestyle, and like you said, in you know, at the time we just did what we did and we enjoyed what we did.
Yeah.
But and maybe it was right for us in our respective lives and jobs at that time. But I have to say, nature and I'm certainly not off the grid, far from it, sitting here in Massachusetts. But I am near the coast. Nature has become really important, and so yeah, I can hear how, not just from the healing aspect, but just from the whole experience aspect, how important it is to you that you're making this move. So it doesn't sound like you're going to have any regrets, is what I'm pointing to.
I don't think so, because I thought whether I did this here or in Europe, and I certainly took places in France, and I certainly love Central Portugal. There were certainly considerations for me. It's the lifestyle that I create, and I think it's more about more self-responsibility, more awareness of how I interact with the communities. Don't act thoughtlessly, and bring pain necessarily to people because I'm so busy, And when back at my life, working in London and thinking I'm busy, 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 and when I thought about it, and I thought, what am I busy doing? I'm busy meeting people for coffee at the latest shop or the latest restaurant, or trying kangaroo meat because it was the thing to do. And when I thought about it, what is actually creating? And there was absolutely nothing. I was busy doing absolutely nothing. So I'm hoping that, I can spend time in sort of more creative pursuit. One of the things here is that the light is very bright, so I can do my embroidery more, which I couldn't do for 6 or 7 months of the year in Europe because the light's not, and I find it meditative. So I'm looking forward to exploring more foods, and which I think is an art form itself, And of course, if you get into designing your home and putting thought into that, and making it, there's all sorts of technique looked at, like there's something called Tadalact. It's a Moroccan style where you use basically sand and some pieces like that to, instead of buying, you can make it with this, and it looks like labor of love because you have to keep finishing it with finishing stones and to get a very, very smooth effect. Actually, it's rock hard, so you could use that for sinks, and that looks like a really peaceful pursuit, 10 days with a stone on some sand, And then of course, if you look at the Indian buildings, they I can't remember, it begins with a C, but they use eggshells to create this incredible paint on their walls and things like that, To me, there's a lot to be explored. And it's something I've been wanting to do for many, many years. Initially, I thought I might try to the commune, but people weren't buying in. They liked the idea, just weren't get to change their lives. So this way, I'm very comfortable that that's what I want to do, and I can do it, and I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to be able to spend my time in something that doesn't hurt, which my lifestyle used to be, on the train, busy, 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 Tuesday, as I went along, because I was so busy, and it was so important, and I don't like being that.
Yeah. Yes, you're not just choosing your lifestyle and your location, you're choosing who you want to be in the world.
Yes, yes, very much so, much so. And I think there's such a consciousness on the planet that more and more people are doing in their own ways. They're making their statements. It's something as simple as, I'm going off the grid. I don't want part of this big system, which I don't agree with. And here, I can do my art, or whatever that is. For me, it's perhaps cooking, my needlework, that kind of thing. For other people, it might be drawing, singing, music. But, that is a far more healthy pursuit, I believe, for one's psyche, for one's mental balance, than and I think it's indicative of how disconnected we became. You know, I mean, we're experiencing cuts on the internet. I'm realizing is it's forcing me to say, well, what else do with my time? You know, so my needlework has come out, my reading has come out. You know, before I didn't have to think about it, I could be plugged into the internet 24/7, and no further thought necessary. You know, but now we're having to build lives.
Absolutely.
Life.
And
So that's exciting.
yeah, very exciting.
Sorry.
And no, I was only going to say I'm thinking your move reminds me of mine and my husband's when we moved to Lagos some years ago. I think many people think that because his family are Nigerian, we literally went, shall we move to Nigeria? Whereas actually what we actually did was got the world map out and literally explored so many countries and where do we want to go and why do we want to go there and what would we do there and, you know, what's our language capacity in that country, etc., etc. Many of the things you've touched upon.
Yes.
And it was similar for you, wasn't it? You didn't, on the face of it, you look like you're someone who was born and raised in Zimbabwe who's returning back to Zimbabwe. But you didn't just make, that wasn't your thought process, was it? That wasn't the journey in determining that you would go to Zimbabwe.
Not at all. Yeah, not at all. I mean, as I said, the plan could have been done in France and Portugal. Both are countries. I love France. I lived there for a few years, and I lived in Portugal for a year, and I loved that country very, very much. But for with what's happening, the different stances that are happening. I mean. I'm aware that Africa is a rising force on the planet now, as there's a lot of awakening amongst the leaders, and they're starting to step into power, which is wonderful. And as of this consciousness shift on the planet, and they want to stand up and be counted, you know, which was possible before. And I think that what you're seeing is who else has asked for peace with various politics in the world, but the African, they're very concerned about peace. They're very concerned that people should start to live a different way. And I personally think that is a shining light for the rest of the world. You know, it might not be perfect. There's a lot that's not perfect, but where are our values? And of course, this continent in particular, and I would say possibly South America to a large extent, as classified as the third world, have become dismissed, diminished, and various things have gone on. And now that's changing. And it's changed. I can remember when I left, you know, we were hearing winds of change are blowing, winds of change are blowing, and there weren't good winds. These winds are very beautiful winds. You know? And it's lovely. It's lovely to watch. I mean, you know, I'm in a neighborhood that's in the North. It's a growing neighborhood. You know, still dirt roads and whatnot at some parts and potholes. But these are big manors being built. Okay, I'm in a cottage to a manor house. Okay, this, you know, there's not poverty. You know? And this neighborhood is huge. You can drive and drive and drive. You talk kilometers in the making, and all mansions of an acre minimum. Okay, beautiful wrought iron fencing that has nothing to do with city. You know, solar panels, boreholes, beautiful lawns, manicured gardens. You know? These are people on the move. You know?
Yeah.
And that to me is beautiful. It's beautiful.
It's interesting because you know what you're sharing is a revelation, I think, for some people because of the perception we have in England and perhaps in America and other places So you're painting a very colourful, vivid, dynamic, like, image, which is really restorative, you know, not just to your soul, but to the soul of Africa, you know, because actually, you know, you're just sharing it how it is, not how people might think it is. Yeah, it's like discovering a jewel. And, you know, I think for many people appreciate there are, you know, the Africans amongst us. We know that Africa has tremendous value and commodities, and I don't just mean the commodities of a diamond, I mean the commodities of quality living. You know, and yeah, so it's really lovely how you're sharing that and making that accessible and available for people listening. I really like that, how vividly you've made that come alive. And
I think for me, sorry, carry on.
No, please carry on. I won't forget what I wanted to say.
I think for me, I wouldn't have appreciated it as much inside of the world. And to a large extent, one of the reasons I didn't come back certainly was because of what I saw in the media about Africa. Okay, equally I had contacts here, and you know, but I think it's time now that they understood there's a hell of a lot more to Africa than what is portrayed in certain media forum, you know. But there are a lot of if you know where to look, there's a lot of information on how the Africans are seeing themselves, and how even Africans are saying, look, it's time we stood up, started being counted, you know, and stop thinking in a poverty conscious and sort of way. So they're saying we've got to take responsibility for that, you know, which I find quite magnanimous given the history of Africa. You know, we're saying, yeah, I know what happened, but we want to do things a different way, and we don't want war, and we don't want violence, and let's learn a different way to be. And for me, that's amazing. Amazing, given everything that's happened. You know, that's very precious. You know, in my opinion.
And it's also ironic because one of the things you mentioned to me recently that means so much to you is the discovery of freedom. You use the word freedom, and inside of what you've just said, that wouldn't be some, you know, that's a sharp irony that you're discovering freedom. Do you want to say a bit more about that?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah. So one of the things, you know, having had the experience in the West and seeing the general direction of where things are going there, here people have been down that road to a large extent. They don't trust the governments, they don't banks, they don't trust. So they're very capable, self-sufficient, very entrepreneurial, you know. But it occurred to me to be able to just buy a plot of land and grow the vegetables that you want, or the fruit, but build a house that you want, without telling you what to do and how to do it and when to do it. All the rules that are very oppressive, I find, in the West. And I just realized what freedom, what a gift that kind of freedom is. I mean, I've got a friend who bought a plot of land, and she was sending me pictures of the house she was building, and she's got some other houses, and maybe her farm, and then she put this, and she bought that, and she put that. And I thought, I never heard her mention about planning permission. You just go and you buy land, and provided it's beyond certain council areas, it's yours to do with as you please. But because there's so much land, nobody's standing on each other, you know. Yeah, in the city, smaller plots and things like that. But where I go off grid, there's no reason for me to talk to anybody about what it is that I want to do with my plot, that I want hectares, you know. And I thought, my God, a gift freedom is. You know, in a way, I sort of thought we were free, you know, rules, yes, it's got to be good with society and all of that. But I think it's tipped over the edge where it now, you think without getting permission, you know, and the thought, and I watch the podcast with the people, say, in Portugal that I watch, and right, we need to, okay, right. I don't hear them talking about planning permission. They just say, we need to do the plot, and this is what, you know, they will observe the rules, you know, fire, you know, you can't use machinery when it's high risk, and da, 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 da. And of course they'll do that, but you need to run every 5 minutes and get permission for this and permission for that. You know, how are we going to build the wall? And is it, you know, and so when I realized, oh my goodness, nobody's going to tell me to do. And I can do exactly what I want, which I hope will be in harmony with nature. My more greater concern is that it's in harmony with nature, you know. But my goodness, what a gift, very precious gift in my now, to have that. A friend of mine, Ivory Coast, has just built himself a hotel on the beachfront. You know, how many of your friends can do that? None of my Western friends do that, unless they're somehow loaded, but none of them have done it, okay? And there he is, and I know how he started, and he's been able to work his way up. He's now built his hotel on the seafront. And yeah, you know, that's exciting. And I can remember energy when I was a young child, you know, because the country was growing, and it was, oh, what can we do? We're going to build it up, and, you know, we can go and have a house down in Mozambique, and, you know, that kind of thing. It was all excitement. What can we create? You know, which I think is so precious, so precious. And I think it's been lost in the West, you know, with the relentless rules, you know. That's, yeah, for me, this is just, it hit me the other day, how freedom is to live how you want to live. Obviously, providing you're not hurting anybody else but the planet, you know. That's another being. You know?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, very precious. So yeah, Africa's certainly got all of those opportunities. A friend of mine, she got stuck here with the thing in 2020, and she decided not to go back to the UK where she had been living. And she's built this most stunning house that overlooks Victoria Falls because she can.
Amazing.
You know, it's incredible. Yeah.
And you know, when you move countries, I think there's always surprises, and clearly this discovery of freedom is one of them. And the other thing I've noticed in talking to people and looking at my own life is that opportunities occur that when you were planning the move were not obvious, you know. So, you know, I'm sat here in Massachusetts and I'm doing all manner of courses and, you know, discovering all sorts of things that in a busy lifestyle that I would have had in the UK without questioning my life, you know, I just do my life, I wouldn't have made time for, or it wouldn't have occurred to me to try out that new thing. So, you know, my experience is I'm trying out lots of things where I hitherto would have said, I can't do that. I'm not good at that, you know, and I wouldn't have found the time to do it. So I do think there's something intriguing that happens when you move countries where you're in a new environment, you're in a new headspace, you're in a new dynamic. People's, you know, think differently, and not wrong or right. You're just in a new environment, but it does give some stunning opportunities. And obviously, you're still new to Zimbabwe, but are you seeing anything like that that you hadn't seen before that's kind of popping its head up and making you think, oh, that's interesting? Or is there anything like that beginning to show up?
For me, one of the things is that the supermarkets are beautifully full, okay, which was a problem a few years ago, but they're beautifully full now. But what I'm stunned and I'm thrilled about is these little artisan markets we've been introduced to, okay, and a range of things that people are covering. And one of the things was there was a stand we saw with macrame handbags and shoes and things like that. And those items were made by the women in the prison, okay? And that is so that those can raise money to support their family, which I found a stunning concept, and there was the lady marketing these goods on behalf of the prisoners. So, but I think the biggest thing for me, is just the realization that it's safe, compared to all the headlines and the drama and whatnot, and seeing a people who've had time to start wounds and a people who have a plan, okay,
People who have what?
They're big. A plan. They're not. When I was here 40 years ago, the conversation I had with people were very different then about the corruption and the depression that came with it. And now, you've got the youngsters who 30s and 40s who really weren't part of all, or didn't really have an awareness of it. And they're just their lives, everybody's got a mobile. Yesterday we didn't have internet, and apparently they're having a meltdown because there was no internet. So it's very, very intelligent people, speaking I don't know how many languages, English being one of them, currencies, they're dealing in different all the time because the Zimbabwean currency is very weak. For example, we had a bill the other day of 120 odd US, equates to over 1 million, what they call bond RTGS. Okay. But these different currencies and all the issues that gives, but how many people deal with different currencies on a day-to-day basis in their daily lives? And as I say, the realization of just how much money is floating around.
Just how much what?
Cash.
Cash.
Money. Yeah, cash. So when you realize that, and they're very simple people. There's no specialized health or if you don't have a job, you get the dole, and the UK doesn't exist here. If you don't work, you starve. It's quite simple, and everybody's got a plan. So for me, that's a shift in my thinking. I kind of knew that if I didn't have a job, I would starve. But then you go to Europe, and somehow things go along. Whereas here, it's in your face every day. If I can go to work, I've got a problem. But I think it makes for very self-aware people and very able people. They're not looking to resolve their issues for them. And I don't think that thing, given what I'm seeing in the West and how it's pretty stuck, So I don't know how many hurdles I'm going to encounter, a long journey, and perhaps, if you're appraised of all of those. But I think what I'm learning, patience and peacefulness, and just being. I'm not plugged into the news anymore. It's irrelevant what the news is, because I didn't come here because of that. and just work to into people and build habits here, and then think, what's plan B, where are we going to live, and going to do it. And we're starting those conversations, you know. We buy a plot of land, build a house, or you know, I don't know. We're playing with those ideas, which means we probably have to rent for a bit whilst we do that. But you know, that's a very nice thought for me, because I do want to do that. So the sooner I can get on with it, for me. And yeah, we ran into the other day in the supermarket, and she said, "Oh, nothing's easy here." And it transpired some time in the UK, and she said, "Here we learn patience. We just have to learn patience." And living is very peaceful. You know, you have roads heaving with cars. Okay, rush hour, yeah, it gets busy. You know, there's a line of cars down the road, but it's not the intensity that you get in the UK. There's just cars everywhere. You know, here it's pretty peaceful. You know, although the potholes are not so happy. But
No, no, not at all.
But we've discovered, yeah, there's just, I think it's just a very pleasant surprise to see how much is going on compared to what you hear in the media, you know. And I know there's a guy called Wodemaya. I think he's Ghanaian. Maybe he's Nigerian, but he has a podcast, and he goes around Africa, and even he says, "My goodness, look what we've been told in our news, and look what's happening in Mozambique. Look at what's happening in Zimbabwe." You know, so he goes right around Africa, doing, you know, same thing. You know, the press has been pretty anti you know, countries.
And he's sharing the real deal.
Yes, absolutely. And there's a lovely lady, she's got a TED talk called Change Your Channel. Her name is Malene Spart-Williams, and she's from Sierra Leone, a highly educated lady with very pertinent questions. But, you know, again, she's talking about very beautiful people, you know, incredibly beautiful country, you know. And I can remember years ago when I first Paris and lived in Paris, I saw these amazing African women, and I called them ships in full sail. They looked magnificent with their traditional head, you know, traditional dress and everything. And I had the opportunity to sit next to Wayne, and I said, "Where are you from?" And she said, "Senegal." And we got talking. And she said, "You've got to go to Dakar." She said, "It's just like Paris. Everything works." And I thought, wow. You know, that's beautiful. Yeah, I have a Dakar who keeps inviting me, but I've still got to get there. And, you know, but yeah, that was incredible. She said everything's just the same. You know, but also what I learned in France was the countries that the French go to on holiday are different from the countries the British go to on holiday. So of course, Senegal's on their list. You would never have a British person unless they're really intrepid going off to South. But, you know, if you look at the tourist shops, Senegal is there, Cameroon is there, you know, and I thought, wow, that's incredible to notice. You know, where do the different people go on their holiday?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think if people go to Africa on a holiday, it might be something like an all-inclusive in Gambia or something, or to safari, you know, on safari, as opposed to just going to the country and discovering what you discover and exploring what you explore, you know. Going within a very structured, a lot of holidays are very structured, I would say. So yeah, interesting.
And I think that's the kind of the doing things, whereas I don't think twice necessarily of hiring a car to travel around. And certainly for me, you need a car in Africa. You absolutely need a car, you know. So for me, that's not such a big deal, but I would find it very limiting if I was, you know, to to go to a kind of structured way in a place like Africa, because you do huge distances without even thinking about it. Just driving down to the airport, you've done a few kilometers.
Absolutely.
So I would, for those who can't drive, I would say that's a very limiting thing. You absolutely need to be able to drive. And you have, again, we're back to freedom. You can go here, there, and everywhere. There's no problems traveling around, it's, I think, although I've always loved Africa, I think for Westerners, it's a discovery because of the bad press that's been repeated and repeated to scare everybody off. And I've seen African Americans saying, oh my goodness, I heard all of this, but you come here, it's, a different story. It's a happening place.
Exactly. Absolutely.
So,
yeah, amazing. Wow. Well, so much has got said, and I feel like I've learned quite a lot about Zimbabwe, and I know I have a standing invitation to come to Zimbabwe, so I hope I get to see your off the grid home, and maybe I'll come and help you paint a wall or something.
Oh, you'd be so welcome. Come and spend time.
That would be great. Feel like I've contributed to the harmony. Yes, exactly. Well, I think it's a plan. So, but I really want to thank you, Micheline. It's really lovely to speak with you, and especially as you're literally in the throes of moving, having just moved. It's generous of you to find the time, and there's only a number of weeks you're in the headspace you're in. After when someone's lived in a country a few months, it's a different headspace, and I think sharing from that new move space is very valuable to people listening as well. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Oh, it's been an absolute talking to you, and I hope it's useful and for your viewers.
Thank you very much. All right, and we'll talk soon. Take care. Thank you. All right.
Lovely.
Bye.
Okay, cheers then. Bye.